Hi everybody, it's Wicked Felina. Been gone for a little while because I just haven't been well. Anyway, we're going to be talking about this whole government shutdown and the importance that the Dems are placing on illegals coming to this country, or why they want so many illegals coming to this country. So, according to Paul Ryan, the Dems have chosen to hold the military hostage in a sense because they don't get paid, and children's health insurance dries up in 7 states, and there's also a tax, a medical device tax that's going to kick in. So it looks like the Dems are kind of being a little hypocritical. Let's see. Oh, Nancy Pelosi called it, when you shut down the government, legislative arson. The Daca deadline isn't until March. So why they're doing this now is probably to take all that good news from Trump away from him, that the economy is doing so good, especially that the African Americans' unemployment is the lowest since 1972. And that getting out that this guy who's supposedly a racist has helped the African American population better than any Democrat has, as we knew, for 1972. Then you have the civil rights passed, and of course we know that the Democrat that was in office then was a member of the KKK, and he called that the blank bill, the blank word bill. And he said, we're going to pass this, and we'll have those blanks voting for us for the next 200 years. So the last thing that the Democrats did that was supposedly good for Black people, which really wasn't good at all, was that. And in fact, what it did was it required that the father of the children not be in the home, which totally destroyed the African American families in this country. Plus, interestingly, in 1965 is when Ted Kennedy opened up immigration again. And basically he wanted to get people coming from Ireland, his own people coming from Ireland. And he had said something very interesting. He said that, oh, don't worry, we won't have anybody coming from any Asian or African countries, nobody coming from any of those deprived countries. So don't worry about it. But, so the Kennedys looked at these countries in a certain way themselves. It's a very interesting thing that John F. Kennedy said. He said that when he didn't like someone, he said, the president, John F. Kennedy, said that he would make them ambassador of, one of those boogie countries in Africa. Like, so basically that was kind of a very racist thing to say, but it's, of course, the Democrats, they can say whatever they want. So Trump, in a sense, and also, Ronald Reagan, under Ronald Reagan, the unemployment for African Americans was the lowest then too. More African Americans owned houses and their own businesses under Ronald Reagan, which is really interesting. And then the next president that the African Americans are doing well under, and in fact the whole country, the Dow is going through the roof. Jobs are coming back from, from Mexico. Remember, Obama said that this will never happen, and that the good things that were happening in America, we had it was temporary. It was just an illusion. When we had some kind of, prosperity. And the new norm, the real norm, is that we're going to be doing really bad and people are going to be suffering. It's kind of like he stuck the knife in and he keeps twisting it, and he kept doing things that made the economy worse and worse and worse. But, it was really interesting that when he passed Obamacare, which was supposed to be affordable, but we found that most people found it not affordable because they couldn't pay was it 5 times their premiums went up 5 times, and then the deductibles went up so high that they couldn't even use their health insurance, and people were fined if they didn't buy the health insurance. Well, the interesting thing is right after that was passed is when he opened up the border, and he had all the children coming across the border, which some of them weren't actually children. I don't know if you remember this. Some of them, the border agents were essentially saying that, they're telling us that they're under 18, but, when they investigated a little bit more, they were in their 20s and 30s. They were just saying that they were children. And a lot of them were going into high school and saying, oh, really, I'm in my teens. And we know of some events that happened with some of these people who are illegal to some of the young girls in high school, that there was a big age disparity there, and some crime happened. I don't know if you remember that. But also, it's interesting. So he passes Obamacare, and then he opens the borders, and all these people are coming in, or these children are coming in, and thousands got caught up in sex trafficking, because the people who were taking them over the border were coyotes. And the coyotes, to pass through Mexico, have to have an agreement with the Mexican government to do that, because Mexico's got a wall on their border with machine guns, and if they catch you coming into their country, then they'll put you in jail for at least a year. Remember that our military man, he accidentally went over the border to Mexico, and they arrested him and threw him in jail, and Obama just let him sit in jail and didn't do anything about it. So it's a very difficult country. Also, if you move to Mexico, do you know that even if you become a Mexican citizen, since you weren't born there, you can never ever vote? So things are a little bit kind of like the rules can only apply for them, but it can't really apply for, we have to follow the rules. Mexico wants us to have an open border and no wall. And basically, see, what happens is, you don't realize this, that, a lot of good people who are Mexicans who come over the border want to escape the corruption. And most of the guns in Mexico are illegal. Then they come over the American border, or Obama sent all those guns, fast and furious, down to Mexico. And we know we can trace the guns because the serial number. And they were going through the same tunnels that, the drugs that Hezbollah was bringing to America from South America were coming through the same tunnels that the guns, Obama was sending guns down, to South America through Mexico. And then the drugs were coming up through the same tunnel. So that's kind of interesting. And some of those guns ended up in the Paris terrorist attack. And those guns ended up killing thousands and thousands of Mexican citizens. So, you see, if you have a child and you want the child to come to America because later on you want to have the parents come up, because this is all about chain migration, well, you give the kids to the coyotes, the drug runners. And the drug runners are notorious for taking these children and sending them into sex trafficking. And so they end up becoming sex slaves, thousands of them. And, Obama opened up the borders and basically told the parents to send these kids over here. And then thousands, a bunch, thousands, another segment, MS-13 gangs. Now, MS-13 gangs operate on the eastern border, basically. And they bring in drugs, and they're known to, chop up other Mexicans with hatchets. And there was a recent killing where a man was found. His heart was, first they stabbed him 100 times, and they beat him up, they cut his heart out, you know, like the Aztecs. Mexico used to be, that nation used to be, that was the Aztec nation, but it was called Mexicana, or Mexica, it was called Mexico, and we called them the Aztecs. And they used to, you know, they used to sacrifice people, sometimes up to 6,000 people a day. You know, they bring them up the steps, and then they cut the heart out, and they hold the heart up and take a bite out of it, you know, because the gods had a thirst for blood. And anyway, it's kind of like they're taking the Aztec religion and they're incorporating it into the way they, you know, they rape and they bring drugs, and they're really, really violent. And their whole way is kind of an imitation of the Aztec civilization, which Mexico used to be. And what they did was they cut the guy's head off too, and they threw him in a shallow grave. But, you know, there are many gangs like this that came over the border. It's not just MS-13. They're all over, and there's a lot of other names. So that came over the border, and it was just discovered. Also, documentation. In fact, I read this on the Daily Wire, that Obama knew that these people were gang members from MS-13. He knew that these were gang members who ended up killing Mexican people, which is interesting. If I was Mexican and I ran across that border, because I would want to escape the corrupt government, a government who works, for God's sakes, with the coyotes, with the drug runners. This is a very corrupt government, very difficult government. So if I wanted to escape Mexico, ran over the border, I would not want to run into these people. I would rather have them, if you want to stay across that border, that's fine. But if you care about Mexican people, you should make sure that none of these people who rape and murder are coming over the border too, and the drug dealers. Interesting. Also, the drug dealers, you know that according to the Boston police, that 73% of the drug dealers that sell fentanyl, and are, you know, 60,000 Americans were killed over the opioid epidemic. Well, 73% of them, and this is, you know, this is what they caught and they prosecuted in the courts, are illegal aliens from the Dominican Republic. And some of them have 3 to 5 driver's licenses. Like they just recently arrested a woman. She was also illegal herself, who was working for the Department of Motor Vehicles, giving these licenses, issuing these licenses. So this is, it's really kind of huge, you know. And you know that another interesting thing is that I'm going to take a drink of that little ginger ale. Oops, excuse me. I'm sorry. Anyway, that I remember when Trump said, and I'm kind of sick of hearing this, because Trump said there's a crime coming over the border from Mexico, and he said that they're bringing drugs. Some of them they're rapists, and some are I'm sure are very good people. So basically, that's a subset of all the people that are coming over. There's some that are bringing drugs. There are some that are rapists, and there are some, he said, that are very good people. And Mexico wasn't sending their best. You know, the first thing, anytime you watch a movie or a TV show and somebody is a criminal, they just committed a crime, they'll say, you know, the police chief will say, check the borders, you know, check the air, you know, check the any way, like the bus stations, the airports, the whatever. People when you're a criminal, you've done a crime, the first thing you do is to go to the border to escape that country and to get into another country so you can get away with your crime. So that could be the reason why that there is a lot of, if you got an open border, then a criminal will say, hey, the border's open. I can just run over that border. In fact, the president of that country is inviting us over. So essentially, it's like, I'm running to America, especially when the president basically said you come over the border, and it's basically telling people how to come over the border. And what you do is you hold your hands up and you go to a border patrol agent. You hold your hands up, and they basically, what Obama did was he bussed and flew people all over the country, and he put them into red counties because he wants to turn them blue for voting purposes. And basically, if you put them into housing immediately, to get benefits, you have to have an address, because you have to have a phone. They call you, and then that they work with you over the phone to get you benefits and housing. So Obama made sure that they got into housing so they could get benefits. So basically what he did was he knew, he knew that a lot of these gang members were coming over the border, but then again, he also knew that Hezbollah came out in political. I did a video on this as well, that Hezbollah was sending drugs over through Central America, and 60,000 people died from these drugs last year. And so he knew about that too. And I hear all these things. Oh, getting back to the rape. Now here comes something's coming down my street. Okay. So according to Pew Research and also Amnesty International, about 80% of the women that come over the border, basically, they're probably coming for a better life and encouraged to come over to this country, 80% of them are raped. So the guys who are rapists, they know where to go. You go to the border, and then you can, find women who are vulnerable. So I would say it's not a good idea to send unaccompanied children. Some of them weren't even children. Some of them are about 38 years old now. And it was 2013, I think, is when he opened the border. Or the law said that you are covered under Daca if you are under the age of 31. So that's basically, I wouldn't consider myself a child at that age, but maybe Obama thinks that you are a child up to that age. I have no idea. But it's not a good idea to encourage people to come over a border where they could get harmed or raped. So when Trump said that there are rapists among them, and some are very good people, I'm sure, that there's a subset that are rapists, because this is what's happening. It sounds to me like Trump was actually quite informed when he mentioned about rape, that he must have been informed from Pew Research and Amnesty International that there were rapists coming across the border, because they're looking for the women that are running across the border. And why not come across the border, put your hands up, get into some kind of welfare program over here, and basically, and if you want a job, you see, there's 134,000 people in California that are homeless, that can't get work. The reason why they can't get work is that it's a sanctuary state, and they will work for, you see, an illegal can work for a quarter of the wage. And these 1%ers, these very wealthy people, want cheap labor. They want a serf class. So basically the Democrats are catering to the wealthy people who want to have a serf class, who don't want to pay people any more than a quarter of the legal wage, and they don't want to pay unemployment insurance or workers' comp. So these wealthy people kind of get away with a lot when we have sanctuary states like that. Basically, one thing is, as we know with the Kate Steinle case, that if you are if you are a criminal, if you committed a crime, they'll actually let you go and keep you safe instead of keep you safe from being deported. And I say that's not safe for not just white people, but it's not safe for the other minorities who might want to live in this country and be safe. Not if you let everybody, if you're a criminal, let them be free. But you see, if you are a citizen, you cannot get that job. You cannot get a job because if you say, okay, I'll work for 1/4 of the wage under the table, they will not hire you because you're an American citizen, and you could turn around and you could tell authorities and they'll get sued or put in jail. So they will never hire you even if you want to work for 1/4 of the wage. And see, there's the problem there. And so there's 134,000 people that are on the streets that are able-bodied that want to work. And if you were African Americans used to work in construction and drywall and roofers, but they used to be able to support a family and send 2 kids to college. But because the illegals have taken these jobs for 1/4 of the wages, basically there's a lot of African Americans that are out of work because of that. And which is another interesting point, was there's 20,000 in LA alone that are homeless and are African American. And which is interesting because I remember hearing, it wasn't just in Obama's book, but he wrote that in his book, but I remember seeing him speaking from in front of an audience about how the border should be shut because it hurts African Americans. It's taking their jobs away from them. And also the benefits that they need to help them survive, and also to better their communities, see, there's about 70 different languages being spoken in LA schools, 70 different, and each child has to have an interpreter. And so African Americans are having a difficult time graduating. They could, but you see, the schools are so overburdened. When you're overburdened from people coming from all different countries and they're not even citizens, where the African Americans who came here against their own will are here, need extra help in school. And the schools are overburdened, so they don't get that help. And so what happens is they end up having to find their own way. A lot of them end up getting into gangs, and of course they don't go to college, and they feel they're in search for respect, self-respect, and they're in search for it, and they find it in other ways, and a lot of them end up going to prison. So if we just gave them a little more help in school, but we don't have the money, because I know they say that, yes, the illegals do, and that's the technical word, illegals do contribute to the tax base. In California, yes, about $2 billion they contribute to the tax base, but they cost the state $22 billion. So it kind of doesn't really matter. So, I was going to get into this whole thing and how the Democrats are basically shutting down the government. Remember when Obama shut down the government the last time? He kind of punished the veterans who were in their 90s, and they wanted to see the war memorial one more time before they died, and they were on their way to Washington, D.C. And so Obama put up barricades. I mean, they shut the government down, and then he put up barricades around these walk-through monuments that don't have anybody manning them, doesn't cost us anything to begin with. And he had people there that were sending the veterans away, purposely making them turn around and go. Like, he did that on purpose. And Mount Rushmore, you couldn't even, if you drove past it, you couldn't stop and look at it. Or if you were in a motel and it was public land, like a state park outside your door, you had to stay in the hotel. So basically it was kind of twisting the knife in, you know. So this whole government shutdown business is for when DACA doesn't even expire until March. It's basically they want to help people who are here illegally, who are not citizens. And there's this whole list. In fact, I have this whole list of things of these people in our country that the Democrats are no longer helping American citizens. They're not helping. They used to be the party of the blue-collar worker. The most important thing is somebody who's not a citizen, somebody who's here illegally, is the most important thing to the Democrats now. And, you know, we have people living in the Appalachians who are poorer than poor, and their teeth, as children, their teeth are falling out and rotting because they're not even getting enough money to eat, and there's no chance of them going to school or to college or to better their lives or to have a dream or somebody helping them in school so they can get out of that situation. I mean, the Appalachian people, who a lot of them are part Native American, and there are also some African Americans too living in the Appalachians. And this is poor. I always used to say that my father came from poverty that's pretty much as close to that as possible. He is poor that we'll never know that kind of poor. He was a foster child too, which he ended up in very, very, very sad living conditions. But these people, the children were losing their teeth because they have no dental care. And when I was mentioning Obamacare was passed just in time for the borders. Then he opened up the borders, and then he started bringing refugees in. And a lot of Muslims from Africa and the Middle East started coming into this country. It's like he passed Obamacare, and it was supposed to cover American citizens that were too poor to pay for their own health care. Instead, it ended up costing American citizens so much money that they can't even use their health care. So there's a segment that's just paying for it, can't use their health care, and it was supposed to cover American citizens who couldn't afford health care. Instead, he made sure that not only do these people who he's bringing in from these other countries have housing, you know, and homeless people in this country don't have housing. They're homeless and they don't have health care and they can't vote. He did this basically, and he had MS-13 coming into this country, bringing drugs that are killing us and also killing other Mexicans and other minorities. But Obamacare was passed just in time to bring in all these people, basically. And if you ask them, who would you vote for? You know, study says, who would you vote for? These people that are coming in, they all say Democrat, and ask why. Because the free stuff, the free benefits. So basically, they're paying for votes. This is all for votes. They're shutting down the government unnecessarily right now because for said people who aren't American citizens, and we have children, the life expectancy of the people of the Appalachians is lower than, about as low as the life expectancy of Native Americans. And they need health care, and they're not getting health care. Obamacare is supposed to cover, everybody has to pay for pediatric dental care, whether they have a child or not. Just a second, drink some water. and for birth control and gynecological visits, even if you're a guy. But these children and these people in the Appalachians, they're losing their teeth. They lose their teeth as children, which means they're not even getting dental care, so they're not the recipients of Obamacare. And to go to, if they want to get job training for the unemployment office, they have to walk 2.5 hours. They have to walk each way. That's 5 hours they have to walk just to get there. And nobody's helping them in school. And there's a big drug epidemic, and the life expectancy is like the same as if you lived in Rwanda. And so nobody really cares about, and that's in our own country that this is happening, amongst many other things. Well, it's been going on for about a half an hour, and I think you get my point, that the most important thing is we must help people who are, which I think Trump wants to help, and he will help them. So that really isn't the question. He just wants the border wall. He doesn't want chain migration. He wants to end the visa lottery because it's causing an awful lot of problems. And there are about 3 million people who come into this country every year, 1 million legal, and most of them are not white. There's 1 million, and that's what he wants. He wants legal immigration. And it takes people years. My brother-in-law came over from India, and it takes years. And he's a professor, and they're both professors. They're both very smart. Years for these people to be able to come to this country. And he is, in fact, he is very dark-skinned for an Indian. These are not, most of them are not white. So this is not a race thing. It's not that Trump doesn't not like certain people because of their race. The legal immigrants that want to come in are mostly not white, and you're making it difficult for them. And then there's the visa overstays, and then there's, of course, the people who come in illegally. It's about 3 million a year that we take in. Most of them are not white. So this isn't about race. It's about legally coming to this country. And it really isn't fair. And interesting, when he said the other day, he mentioned Norway. As we know that the Prime Minister of Norway had just visited, and the UN just put out a report saying that Norway has the people from Norway work the hardest at achieving, this is the kind of merit-based immigration that Trump wants. And so Norway represents that. And then at the bottom of the list, so that was according to the UN, but what he said Norway, and he said Asia. Can't we have more Asians who are not white? And like I said, my brother-in-law, who's a South Asian, is very dark-skinned. So no, this has nothing to do with race. But anyway, I have to end now because my card is running out. So anyway, see you again. Bye-bye.